My name is Rebecca Chen, and I died on a rainy Thursday afternoon in October, or at least, that's what everyone believed. I was driving home from my accounting firm in downtown Seattle, the windshield wipers struggling against the relentless downpour that turned the I-5 into a blurry mess of red taillights. The radio was playing some forgettable pop song, and I remember thinking about the leftover lasagna waiting for me at home. My husband Mark had texted earlier saying he'd be working late again, the third time that week. After 12 years of marriage, I'd grown accustomed to his absences, though the hollow feeling in my chest never quite went away. The semi-truck came out of nowhere. One moment I was changing lanes, the next I heard the screech of tires and felt my small sedan spinning like a toy. Metal crunched, glass shattered, the world turned upside down, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I wasn't in heaven or hell. I was in Harborview Medical Center's ICU, hooked up to more machines than I could count. A nurse with kind eyes and dark braids leaned over me. "Welcome back, honey," she said softly. "You gave us quite a scare. I'm Denise. You've been unconscious for 3 days." My throat felt like sandpaper. "My husband, Mark." Denise's expression shifted slightly, something unreadable crossing her face. "Let's focus on you right now. You suffered severe trauma. Broken ribs, collapsed lung, head injury. The doctors weren't sure you'd make it. Over the next few days, I learned the full extent of what happened. My car had been crushed so badly that first responders couldn't immediately identify me. My purse, my phone, everything had been thrown from the vehicle. In the chaos and rain, they'd pulled out my driver's license, but the photo was water damaged and barely recognizable. The hospital had tried calling Mark multiple times, but he never answered. They'd left voicemails, sent messages to the emergency contact number I'd provided years ago. Nothing. "We finally reached your father," Denise told me on day 5, adjusting my IV. "He's flying in from Phoenix tomorrow." My father? I felt tears prick my eyes. Dad and I had been close before Mom died 2 years ago, but grief had pulled us into our separate corners. "What about Mark?" Denise pressed her lips together. "Honey, I think you need to focus on healing right now." But I couldn't let it go. "Please, I need to know," she sighed, pulling up a chair beside my bed. The afternoon light filtered through the blinds, casting shadows across her tired face. "We finally got through to someone at his office. They said Mark Chen was attending a funeral. Your funeral." The words didn't make sense at first. They bounced around my foggy brain like pennies in a jar. "What?" There was a mix-up with the identification. "The coroner's office. They made a mistake. Your husband was told you died in the crash. There was a closed casket funeral 3 days ago." I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting them over and over. 24. There were 24 tiles. "He thinks I'm dead. I'm so sorry. The hospital administration is working to correct the error, but these things take time." The police, the coroner's office, the insurance companies, it's a whole mess of bureaucracy. My father arrived the next morning, his face gray with shock and relief. Robert Chen had always been a sturdy man, a retired civil engineer who built bridges for 40 years, but when he walked into my hospital room, he looked like he might crumble. "Becca," he whispered, his voice breaking. "They told me you were gone. I stood at your funeral. I gave a eulogy." I reached for his hand, wincing at the pain the movement caused. "I'm here, Dad. I'm alive." He sat heavily in the chair, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. We stayed like that for a long time, my father holding my hand like I might disappear if he let go. "Mark was there," he finally said, his voice rough. "At the funeral. He seemed devastated. There was a woman with him, blonde, younger. He introduced her as a colleague who was helping him through everything." Something cold settled in my stomach. What was her name? Ashley something? She was very attentive to him. 2 weeks after the accident, I was transferred to a rehabilitation facility in Redmond. My body was healing, but slowly. The physical therapist, a cheerful woman named Maria, worked with me every day to rebuild my strength. The collapsed lung had healed, but my ribs ached with every breath, and the headaches came and went like unwelcome visitors. My father had been staying at my house, the house I shared with Mark, to collect some of my things. Each time he visited, he brought clothes, books, my laptop, but his expression grew more troubled. "What is it, Dad?" I asked one afternoon as we sat in the facility's garden. November had brought crisp air and the smell of fallen leaves. I was wrapped in a thick cardigan. My fingers curled around a mug of chamomile tea. He was quiet for a long moment, watching a squirrel dart across the grass. I think you need to prepare yourself, Becca. Things at the house, they're not what you'd expect. Just tell me. Mark's not living there alone. That woman, Ashley, she's moved in. There are pictures of them together on the mantel. Her clothes in the closet. It's like he couldn't finish the sentence. The tea burned my throat as I swallowed. How long? I don't know. But it doesn't look recent. There's a comfort there, a familiarity. His eyes, so much like mine, were filled with anger and sadness. I wanted to confront him, but the lawyer advised against it until we know more. Lawyer? Dad pulled out a manila folder from his bag. I hired someone, Patricia Morrison. She's sharp as a tack and handles family law. Given the circumstances, we need to understand your legal position. You're legally dead, Becca. Your death certificate was filed. Your bank accounts have been frozen pending estate settlement. My hands shook, and it wasn't from the cold. Estate settlement? Your grandmother's trust, the one she left you when she passed 5 years ago. Grandmother Lily had been a successful real estate investor in San Francisco during the tech boom. When she died, she'd left me a trust fund worth $11 million, with strict instructions that it could only be accessed by me and would pass to my children, or if I had none, to designated charities. Mark had always been frustrated by the trust's terms. He couldn't touch it, couldn't invest it in his various business ventures. With you legally dead and no children, the trust is in probate, Dad continued. Mark is your husband and your next of kin. The will you made years ago left everything to him. The realization hit me like a second crash. He thinks he's inheriting $11 million. Patricia pulled some preliminary records. Mark filed for the death benefit on your life insurance policy the day after the funeral. He's also initiated proceedings to access the trust. I set down the tea mug before I could drop it. My whole body felt numb. We need to tell him I'm alive. The hospital, the police, they should have told him by now. That's the thing, honey. Dad's voice was gentle but firm. They tried, multiple times. He never responded to their calls or messages. Patricia thinks he might be deliberately avoiding them. That's insane. Why would he? But even as I said it, the pieces were clicking into place. The late nights, the distance between us over the past 2 years, the way he'd started asking about the trust fund with increasing frequency. Oh, God. Dad squeezed my shoulder. We don't know anything for certain yet, but Patricia wants to investigate before we reveal you're alive. If Mark has been planning something, we need evidence. Over the next week, Patricia Morrison visited me daily. She was a woman in her 50s, with short silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She brought documents, timelines, photographs that my father had discreetly taken at the house. Your husband and Ashley Winters have been in a relationship for at least 18 months, Patricia said, spreading photos across the table in my room. There was Mark and Ashley at a restaurant, holding hands. Mark and Ashley on what looked like a vacation. Palm trees in the background. We traced social media posts, credit card statements your father accessed from the joint account. Mark's been spending heavily. Luxury hotels, jewelry, a lease on a BMW for Ashley. I stared at a photo of them kissing on a beach at sunset. My husband, my Mark, the man I'd built a life with, who'd promised to love me in sickness and in health. There's more, Patricia said carefully. The life insurance policy on you was increased 6 months ago from $250,000 to $1 million. Mark forged your signature on the new policy documents. The room felt too small, the air too thin. He was planning this. We believe so. And when the accident happened, an actual accident, it became the perfect opportunity. Patricia's voice was calm, professional, but her eyes were blazing. Rebecca, we need to proceed carefully. If we reveal you're alive too soon, he could destroy evidence, transfer assets. We need everything documented first. 3 weeks after the accident, I was discharged from the rehabilitation facility. Instead of going home, my home that now housed my husband and his mistress, I moved into my father's house in Phoenix temporarily. The Arizona heat was a shock after Seattle's gray drizzle, but the warmth felt good on my healing bones. Patricia had a plan. We would wait until Mark made his move to claim the trust fund, gathering evidence of fraud. Then, on the day of the probate hearing, I would appear, alive, the ultimate revelation. But living in limbo was harder than I'd imagined. I spent my days doing physical therapy, rebuilding my strength, and my nights reviewing documents Patricia sent over. Bank statements showing Mark's spending, emails between Mark and Ashley discussing their future and what they'd do with the money, text messages that made my stomach turn. "Just a few more weeks, babe," Mark had texted Ashley 3 days after my funeral. "Then, we're set for life." My father tried to keep me busy. We cooked together. His specialty was Chinese hot pot, my mother's recipe. We watched old movies and worked jigsaw puzzles. He told me stories about building the Golden Gate Bridge's sister spans, about the precision required to make something both strong and beautiful. "You're strong, Becca," he said one evening as we sat on his patio, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. "Stronger than any bridge I ever built. You'll get through this." "I don't feel strong. I feel broken. Broken things can be repaired. Your mother used to say that the Japanese have this art, kintsugi. They fix broken pottery with gold, making the cracks part of the beauty. That's what you're doing now. You're filling in your cracks with something precious." I wanted to believe him. Patricia called in early December. "The probate hearing is scheduled for December 18th. Mark's lawyers have filed all the paperwork to claim the trust. We have everything we need. So what happens now?" "Now, we make a resurrection." I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "I've coordinated with the Seattle Police Department and the hospital. They'll have officers present at the hearing. When you walk in, Mark will be arrested for insurance fraud and attempted theft. Ashley might face charges as an accessory if we can prove she knew about the fraud." The plan was set. I would fly back to Seattle on December 17th, stay at a hotel overnight, and appear at the King County Courthouse the next morning. My father insisted on coming with me. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I stood at the window of my hotel room, looking out at the Seattle skyline glittering in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Mark was probably celebrating, thinking he'd won, thinking I was gone, and he was about to become very, very rich. Part of me still couldn't believe it. This was the man who'd brought me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, who'd held me when my mother died, who'd once driven 6 hours in a snowstorm to surprise me on my birthday. But people change. Or maybe they just show you who they really were all along. The King County Courthouse was an imposing building of glass and steel in downtown Seattle. As my father and I walked through the December chill toward the entrance, my heart hammered against my still tender ribs. I dressed carefully that morning. A navy blue suit, my hair pulled back, minimal makeup. I wanted to look alive, undeniably real. Patricia met us in the hallway outside courtroom 3B. "Are you ready?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Mark and his lawyer are already inside. Ashley is with him. The judge will call the case. Mark's attorney will present their claim to the trust, and that's when you'll enter." She studied my face. "You don't have to do this, Rebecca. We can handle it other ways." "No," I said firmly. "I need to see his face. I need him to know." At 9:30, Patricia's assistant texted. It was time. My father held the courtroom door open. I could see Mark, before he saw me, sitting at the defendant's table with his lawyer, a man in an expensive suit. And beside Mark, blonde and beautiful in a black dress, was Ashley. She had her hand on Mark's arm, leaning close to whisper something that made him smile. That smile. I'd loved that smile once. I walked down the center aisle, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. The judge, a woman with gray hair and glasses, looked up from her papers. Mark's lawyer noticed me next, his expression confused. Then Mark turned. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. His mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. Ashley's eyes went wide, and she grabbed Mark's arm tighter, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his sleeve. "Your Honor," Patricia said smoothly, stepping forward. "I represent Rebecca Chen, who is very much alive and present to contest this fraudulent claim to her trust fund." The courtroom erupted. Mark's lawyer was on his feet, sputtering objections. Ashley made a sound like a wounded animal. And Mark just stared at me like I was a ghost. "Order!" The judge banged her gavel. "Mr. Chen, did you know your wife was alive?" Mark's voice was barely a whisper. How is this possible?" "Answer the judge's question," Patricia said sharply. "Did you receive calls and messages from Harborview Medical Center and the Seattle Police Department informing you that your wife survived the accident?" I watched the calculation happen behind Mark's eyes. He was trying to figure out what we knew, how much trouble he was in. There were some calls, but I thought they were scams, people trying to take advantage after Becca's death. 47 calls over 3 weeks? Patricia held up phone records. including several from Detective Martinez of the SPD, who left detailed voicemails. 2 uniformed officers entered from a side door. Detective Martinez, a tall Hispanic man with graying temples, approached the defendant's table. "Mark Chen, you're under arrest for insurance fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. You have the right to remain silent." Ashley stumbled backward, her face white as paper, and then her eyes rolled back. She collapsed in a heap of black fabric and blonde hair, hitting the floor with a thud that echoed through the silent courtroom. "Someone call a medic," the judge ordered, but I couldn't look away from Mark. He was staring at me even as the detective handcuffed him, and in his eyes, I saw everything. Shock, fear, anger, but not love. Maybe there'd never been love, or maybe it had died long before I almost did. "Becca," he said, his voice cracking, "please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," I said quietly. The words felt powerful, final. I heard everything I needed to hear in your text messages. I saw everything I needed to see in the life you built while planning my death. They led him away. Paramedics were reviving Ashley, who was crying and babbling about not knowing anything. The courtroom slowly emptied, leaving just me, my father, and Patricia. "It's over," Patricia said, squeezing my hand. "The trust is secure. The life insurance company has been notified of the fraud. You're going to be okay." My father wrapped his arm around my shoulders. "Let's go home, Becca." "Home," I repeated. The house in Seattle wasn't home anymore. Maybe Phoenix could be, for a while. Or maybe I'd find somewhere entirely new. I had $11 million, a second chance at life, and the freedom to become whoever I wanted to be. As we walked out of the courthouse into the crisp December air, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, not yet, but possibility. The world was wide open, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see what came next. 3 months later, I was sitting in a cafe in Portland, Oregon, reviewing plans for a nonprofit I was starting, a foundation to help domestic abuse survivors rebuild their lives. My father had moved up to be closer to me, and we'd found a beautiful craftsman house near Mount Tabor with a garden where we grew vegetables and herbs. Mark pleaded guilty to all charges and was serving a 3-year sentence. Ashley had indeed known about the fraud and received a year of probation. Their story made headlines for a week. Woman survives crash, discovers husband's plot, before fading into the endless scroll of internet news. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about the woman I'd met at a survivor support group, whose story was so similar to mine it hurt. I was thinking about the scholarship fund I was creating in my mother's name. I was thinking about the physical therapy appointment I had that afternoon, where Maria would celebrate how far I'd come. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Dinner tonight? I'm making Mom's hot pot." I smiled and typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." The barista called my name, and I went to collect my coffee. Black, no sugar, just the way I'd always liked it. Through the window, I could see spring arriving in gentle waves, cherry blossoms, green leaves, people shedding their heavy coats. I died and come back to life, literally and figuratively. The cracks were still there, the scars still healing. But my father was right about kintsugi. Sometimes the broken places become the most beautiful parts of who you are. I was Rebecca Chen. I was alive, and my story was just beginning.